Lester Holt, please take care of yourself and each other. Good night.
Tokyo 21, presented locally by IT&E.
KUAM News Headlines is presented by Calvo's Insurance, a legacy of trust, serving Micronesia since 1938. Matson celebrating 25 years of commitment to Guam, Micronesia, and the CNMI. Cars Plus, home of Guam's first and only lifetime powertrain warranty. Visit carsplusguam.com for details. McDonald's of Guam, I'm loving it, and King's Restaurant, serving your local breakfast, lunch, and dinner favorites for over 45 years.
And on primetime, Adriana Cotero has the latest on attempted murder defendant Randy Nauta, who has motioned to dismiss his case with prejudice, claiming self-defense under Guam's Castle Doctrine. Plus, Tyler Metanani heads over to one cemetery where elaborate structures have been erected during the pandemic and go against cemetery policies. And it's a new app that allows island residents to report environmental violations. Isaiah Uggan has that story coming up.
Half a day and good evening, everyone. Attempted murder defendant Randy Jr. Chaco Nauta has motioned to dismiss his case with prejudice. He's claiming self-defense under Guam's Castle Doctrine. KUAM's Adriana Cotero reports.
The Guam Police Department failed to apply Guam's Castle Doctrine in this case, and the prosecution divisions of the Office of the Attorney General of Guam likewise failed to follow the law and apply the pertinent statute in this case. That's how alternate public defender Peter Santos concludes a motion for dismissal with prejudice of certain charges and the attached special allegations against his client Randy Jr. Chaco Nauta. He was indicted for attempted murder, aggravated assault as both a second and third degree felony, and possession of a Schedule II controlled substance for allegedly shooting Jesse Kitachai along San Francisco Street in Agate 3 months ago. It was on February 16th when Nauta and co-defendant Anthony Vincent Ignacio met up and drove to the dead-end street where Kitachai was at. Kitachai had allegedly been threatening Ignacio and what she was going to try and work things out, although then things go bad, documents state. Moments later, several men with weapons walked toward Ignacio and Nauta, who remained inside their car. Kitachai allegedly begins violently striking the car with a metal pipe and knife in hand and attempted to pull Ignacio out of the car. That's when Nauta then allegedly exited the car and shot Kitachai. The co-defendants fled the scene. Further documents say that the entire altercation was captured on a nearby residence's video surveillance system. Attorney Santos argues Nauta's actions were in self-defense and that he is immune to prosecution and should have never been arrested or prosecuted. Santos moves for the dismissal of attempted murder and both of the aggravated assault charges brought down on Nauta. Reporting for Guam's News Network, I'm Adriana Cotero.
And police are currently investigating an officer-involved shooting that occurred today in Mangilao. According to GPD spokesman Sergeant Paul Tapao, at 12:30 this afternoon, a Highway Patrol Division officer noticed a stolen Dodge Challenger along Derry Road. Additional patrol cars arrived and blocked in the vehicle, instructing the passengers to exit. The driver refused to comply and began to rev his engine. He accelerated the vehicle toward the officer, who fired a shot. The car fled the scene toward Route 15 in Mangilao. The car was recovered on Matsumiyu Street in Pagat. No arrests have been reported yet, and no injuries resulted from the shooting. GPD's Criminal Investigation and Internal Affairs sections are investigating. It's a community of crypts transformed into forever homes that violate cemetery policy. Tyler Matanani explains.
What you see behind me at first glance may look like a little neighborhood, maybe even a mini village, but it's actually a cemetery. The Vicente Limtiaco Memorial Cemetery at Nimitz Hill was handed over to the Department of Parks and Rec back in 1998. According to Parks and Rec Director Roque Alcantara, a few of the structures started at the top of the hill, but more elaborate ones started going up at the lower end when the island went into lockdown back in March of 2020.
This started actually during the COVID, but it seems like it got out of hand, and you can see that there's sort of like what I call them, a house for the future, I guess.
Families must go through DPR for a permit before any groundbreaking occurs. According to ground burial policy, absolutely no structures other than head markers are allowed to be built above ground. But as Alcantara explained, the policy is quite vague.
The funeral homes know about it, the family knows about it. It's on the permit that they cannot construct anything above ground. It's just like a dollhouse. It's really, you can see some of them are really,
They're really well
thought out. There's tiling, there's windows, there's doors.
Some of them even incorporated roof drainage systems. He says the issue is lack of enforcement.
Because we don't come around here all the time. It's just when there's a burial, the two guys that are assigned up here come and do the burials, but there's nobody assigned up here.
Alcantara says the construction more than likely happens after working hours or during the weekend. But with no gates and no one to regulate the area 24/7, people are free to come and go at any time. The burial area that holds the elaborate structures are designated as those that died of COVID. At the end of the day, he says his hands are tied.
We can identify the families because we have a log on who's buried there. But how do we approach them and say, break down your shrine, I guess. We're just making sure that they don't build anymore.
He adds that the closed structures make grass cutting difficult and poses further risks when there are typhoons. But the main issue they pose is backhoe entry. For now, the structures will remain, but he says they'll have to work with DPW to see what the law is as far as erecting them. DPR says the long-term solution would be putting up gates and borders around the perimeter, along with installing signs throughout the burial grounds. Reporting for Guam's News Network, I'm Tyler Matanani.
Speculation continues about a possible Guam option for Afghan refugees who might be in danger when the U.S. pulls out of their country in a few months. Reporters again raised the issue during a press briefing today at the Pentagon. National media has reported that Guam is being considered as a processing station for thousands of Afghans who assisted the U.S. military in the 2-decade-long war in Afghanistan. Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby was asked what the Defense Department was prepared to do to help evacuate them and whether there were active discussions about temporarily moving them to Guam.
I don't have any specific planning options to speak to today. I mean, I've seen the press reporting about Guam. I have no specifics to speak to in terms of whether or how we would ever get into a position like that. Planning organization, and we want to be ready for all manner of contingencies, but there's been no tasking to do anything of that sort or to provide any transportation at this time. So I think I'd leave it at that.
The State Department is working to fast-track the processing of special immigrant visas for an estimated 17,000 Afghan refugees. Kirby says Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is actively engaged in interagency discussions about how best to address the issue.
The Secretary is absolutely mindful of our obligations to these very brave Afghans, and we're going to continue to work inside, again, a government-wide effort.
President Biden has called for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan by September. Now that the governor has authorized the payment of pandemic assistance under the All Rise program, the question on most people's minds is, when will they get it? That task falls to the Department of Revenue and Taxation, led by Director Daphne Shimizu, who says an FAQ will be posted to their website for all the many anticipated questions. Applicants will also be encouraged to file online.
Our team has already this past week begun meeting to determine, of course, how we're going to get the application form up and what's going to be involved. Make sure that we're communicating with our IT programmers on this, because again, this is going to be something that we're going to have to be able to have our system process.
This will be the 5th direct assistance program to be paid out by DRT. 3 federal economic impact payments and the local Ajuda Iman Gaffer program Unlike the EIP programs, an application is necessary to give DRT explicit authorization to use individual taxpayer data. The executive order allows for payments to start 30 business days after a funding source is identified. Shimizu deferred to the Department of Administration on the identification and availability of the ARP funds. Under the All Rise program, eligibility was expanded to include all individual taxpayers earning less than $40,000 a year and any joint filers earning less than $80,000. GovGuam comes out victorious in a double pay lawsuit case as the court has granted their motion to dismiss without prejudice. But it's not a total loss for the group of government employees who filed the petition, as the court dismissed the case with leave to amend. The plaintiffs sued GovGuam for failing to pay double pay to frontliners for hours worked during the COVID-19 pandemic. Further, the petitioners argued that the CARES Act money is a federal appropriation to be used in response to the public health emergency and that they were not accounted for. The government argued that the plaintiffs lacked standing as taxpayers, and ultimately the court agreed. We're going to take a short break and be right back. Stick with us.
Instant prizes from Foot Locker and Burger.